Hello and welcome to Tony's Bonsai. If you've clicked this video, you're obviously interested in the 5 best ways to thicken your bonsai trunks, and that's exactly what I'm going to cover in this video, as simply as possible, and hopefully you'll be able to understand the principles that you can apply to your trees to achieve that goal. And I'm also going to go around several of my trees giving examples of what I'm talking about and showing you how to do it in real terms. So let's crack on first of all and look at some of these ground planted beech. The first and best way is to get the trees in the ground. Here we've got over 20 beech trees that I planted about 18 months ago in the ground. They're all growing really nice and healthily, and this is the very best way to develop thick bonsai trunks. So this tree here in front of me is a good example. When I first planted it, I did a chop there and I cut the main leader off. It had a really strong growing year, put lots of growth on, and ultimately planting a tree in the ground doesn't cause the trunk to thicken. What causes the trunk to thicken is all of the growth that is generated above. And when a tree's in the ground, it generates lots of branches, it grows lots of healthy leaves, and all these leaves are what make the trunk and the branches thicken. So that's what we're trying to achieve really, and this has done it. So having got to this stage now, this is ready to be chopped a second time, and this is the second tip after growing in the ground, and it's using what's called a sacrificial trunk. So at the top here you can see the trunk comes up, it splits into two. We've got a side branch there, and we've got the main trunk coming up here, and this trunk is a sacrificial trunk. So I've allowed that to grow purely to allow all these leaves to develop, but now is the time when that can be pruned off and the tree can be left to grow for another 12 months, and this side branch will become the new apex. That's a very healthy side branch. That will then shoot off and grow really well, and it'll continue to thicken all the lower sections of the trunk. So it's it takes a little bit of understanding to get your head around, but really we're just letting the trees grow. And if you don't have space to put a tree in the ground, a very similar outcome can be achieved by planting a tree in a large pot. So I like a builder's bucket or a washing up bowl, something large anyway, you know, a several gallon pot, not a bonsai pot, anything that allows it to develop all these lovely leaves. So let's cut that off. So that's back down to last year's chop, which was very successful, and I've just gone in and done the second chop further up, remove the new apex, well, the new sacrificial trunk, and that has now got a new apex. And this is again now another sacrificial trunk, so this will be the third one. That gets to grow for at least another year before I make any more decisions, but all these leaves on here, they'll multiply and grow next year into branches and leaves, and it'll be on its way, and this will probably double in thickness down at the base. So it's quite simple, and this is the most common technique. By chopping the trunk and using a sacrificial trunk, we just develop thickness in the bonsai. Great stuff. I've got an oak tree here, and I have done a couple of trunk chops on this of sacrificial trunks up at the top. However, I have been growing 2 sacrificial branches as well in this tree, so my brother is going to remove them now. And sacrificial branches are ones that you grow from lower down, like that, down here. Just let me get a shot of that, Rick. There we go. See that one that's coming out from the base of the tree? And all the energy from that branch, yeah, cut it. Boom. All the energy that's been going from that branch and all the leaves above it has been going into the very base of the tree, so it really helps to swell and thicken the bottom of the trunk. And I've left two on this, you can see, just to sort of show you a second time, this branch is doing the same thing. So all this energy is flowing down into the base of the trunk and it's giving me that nice swollen bottom. So again, now is the time to remove it. Boom. So that's two sacrificial branches gone. They've done their job and that's developing some nice taper now, that trunk. So a lot of this process is letting stuff grow and then cutting it off, basically, in simple terms. But they were good examples and they've done their job. Nice. We've got an absolutely cracking Yamadori hawthorn here. It's got some lovely movement, and with us now having covered growing in the ground, sacrificial trunk, sacrificial branches, this is another example of letting a tree be healthy. Look at all those leaves and branches that have grown over the last 2 years since I collected this tree. There's no substitute for leaves and branches and vigour to allow a trunk to thicken. But the reason I'm showing you this tree is because it's a good example of developing a good root base. So as I go down to the bottom, what you can see down here hopefully is, look at the fluting up the trunk, where those kind of veins work their way up the side of the tree. Now that fluting only happens when you've got a good radial root spread coming out from the bottom that this tree has got. So that's the next best way to develop taper and thickness in your trunk, is to develop a good nibari, and over the time it thickens that bottom section. What I'm going to do now is prune this tree. Actually, I've been dying to put some shape into this canopy ever since I first collected it, so I think now's a good time for me and my brother to have a think, do some design work and come back to you when this hopefully looks a bit more like a bonsai. Right, the tree's had its first prune since collection. Obviously the trunk is what the trunk is, looks great, but I've tried to add a kind of foliage pad around this area here, which I think works well. It kind of fills in that area behind the trunk hopefully, and I've trimmed the top off as well, so yeah, looking good. The tree's had its first proper trim since collection. It's always good fun when you've spent 3 or 4 years post collection getting a tree nice and healthy, and then you finally get to the time of pruning it, and I've added all this pad or area here, and my idea was that this area kind of comes in behind the trunk there to sort of counterbalance the line, if you will. That sounds rather arty, doesn't it? But if you know what I mean, to fill that space in, and instead of my eye just coming up and across, hopefully in the future it'll move outwards there where all that green is behind, and then just some basic thinning up top of the straggly stuff, and that's a nice first prune, I think, getting it on its way. So that's the 5 easiest and best ways to thicken your bonsai trunk covered. You know, just a brief summary: get it in the ground, let it grow healthy, use sacrificial trunks, use sacrificial branches, and allow the roots to spread in a root radial manner, and you just can't go wrong. As always, thanks for joining us, have a great day, and I'll see you soon.